For decades, it sustained us, but slowly something began to change. Ingredients became complex, portions grew distorted, until we could no longer recognize it.
Stores. People are no longer just checking prices. They are turning boxes around, reading tiny labels, comparing old packaging to new packaging, and asking one question that used to sound paranoid. What exactly are we eating? Juice drinks can have 0% juice. Bread can sit for weeks without looking alive or dead. Snacks can keep the same logo while the ingredients quietly shift. Meat can now be grown from cells. The food still looks normal from the front of the package, but once people flip it over, the trust begins to collapse. For decades, the American grocery store sold comfort. Bright aisles, big brands, smiling mascots, fruit on boxes. Words like fresh, natural, wholesome, family size, heart-healthy, farm-style, original, classic, and made with real ingredients. It gave people the feeling that food was simple, regulated, familiar, and safe. That feeling is breaking. The shock is not just that food is expensive. Americans already know prices exploded. They know a small grocery run can feel like a car payment. They know a bag of chips can cost $6, cereal can look smaller, and frozen meals can feel lighter than they used to. But price was only the first crack. Once people started paying more, they started looking harder. And once they looked harder, the entire store began to feel different. A shopper who used to grab bread now checks the back. Someone buying juice now looks for the actual juice percentage. A parent buying snacks now compares sugar, dyes, oils, fillers, and unfamiliar chemical names. People are not acting paranoid because they suddenly became obsessed with labels. They are reacting to a system that made the label more important than the product image. That is the real shift. The front of the package still sells nostalgia. The back of the package sells doubt. Every video feels like a discovery. Every label feels like evidence. Every reformulated box feels like proof that something changed quietly while everyone was busy trying to afford rent, gas, insurance, medicine, and groceries. The deeper people look, the more they realize the American food system is not built around simplicity. It is built around shelf life, color, texture, cost control, and consumer habit. The food did not suddenly transform overnight. The public finally started paying attention. The easiest place to see the trick is the drink aisle. A bottle can be covered in fruit, colored like fruit, named after fruit, and still contain almost no fruit. Some products that look like juice drinks have 0% juice. Others have less than 1%. Some proudly show a flavor while the actual fruit content barely exists. To a company, this is legal branding. To a customer, it feels like a magic trick performed in fluorescent lighting. A child sees grape, a parent sees purple, the bottle suggests fruit. The label reveals dye, flavoring, sweetener, acid, water, and maybe a trace amount of actual juice. The word flavored does a lot of work. So does made with. So does natural flavor. None of those phrases necessarily mean the product is what the picture makes people imagine. The terrifying part is how normal this became. Americans walk past rows of products that look alive but are engineered to simulate freshness. Orange without oranges, grape without grapes, tropical without anything tropical enough to matter. Green that does not come from lime or apple, but from a color system. Red that feels like berries, but maybe mostly chemistry and branding. This is where trust begins to rot. The drink aisle teaches consumers that food marketing does not need to lie directly. It only needs to imply. It can place fruit on the label, build the color around the memory of fruit, add a flavor profile that tastes close enough, and let the shopper's brain finish the sale. That is not a small issue. It trains people to realize the package is not the product. The package is a performance. Once shoppers understand that, they start looking at cereal, snacks, sauces, frozen dinners, and bread with the same suspicion. If a fruit drink can feel like fruit without being fruit, what else in the cart is only pretending? Then came the label that changed the mood of the aisle: bioengineered food ingredient. For corporations, it is a disclosure requirement. For millions of shoppers, it looks like a warning. The phrase sounds clinical, cold, and unnatural. It does not sound like dinner. It sounds like something designed in a room where nobody asks whether a mother shopping after work will understand what it means. The USDA standard defines bioengineered foods as foods containing detectable genetic material modified through certain lab techniques that could not be created through conventional breeding or found in nature. The National Disclosure Standard requires many food manufacturers, importers, and retailers to disclose bioengineered foods or ingredients, with mandatory compliance beginning in 2022. That timing matters. Many shoppers thought the food had just changed. In reality, part of the shock came from visibility. The system did not suddenly begin using bioengineered ingredients in 2022. The labels became harder to ignore, but technical explanations do not erase public distrust. A label that regulators describe as informational can still feel alarming to a consumer. People see it on boxed meals, crackers, breads, desserts, sauces, and snacks their families have eaten for years. The fear is not only about genetics. The fear is about consent. People feel like they were eating first and learning later. That is why the reaction has been so intense. The word bioengineered lands differently from corn, soy, or sugar. It makes ordinary food feel industrial. It makes a children's snack feel like a science project. It turns a normal grocery run into an investigation. Here is the part that must be said carefully. A bioengineered label alone does not prove the food is poisonous, fake, or directly responsible for every health crisis in America. Throwing wild claims on top of public confusion only makes the conversation easier for corporations to dismiss. The stronger point is more serious. The food system became so complicated that a normal person can no longer understand it without researching federal labeling law. That is the collapse. Not one label, not one ingredient. The collapse is that Americans now need a legal dictionary to buy crackers. Nothing scares people like food that refuses to behave like food. For years, long shelf life was sold as convenience. Bread that lasted longer meant fewer wasted groceries. Tortillas that stayed soft meant fewer emergency trips to the store. Packaged snacks that survived for months made life easier for busy households. But now, the same convenience has started to feel disturbing. People are looking at bread weeks after the date on the bag and asking why nothing happened. No mold, no smell, no visible decay. The old reaction was relief. The new reaction is fear. That shift is powerful because spoilage is one of the oldest signals humans understand. Real food changes. It dries out, it ferments, it molds, it smells, it loses texture. When food appears untouched after too long, the brain starts asking what was added, removed, sealed, stabilized, or altered to make that possible. Scientifically, long shelf life can come from many things: preservatives, moisture control, acidity, packaging, storage temperature, sanitation, and formulation. It does not automatically prove one cause. But the emotional reaction still matters. Consumers are not reacting like scientists in a lab. They are reacting like people who remember food spoiling faster and now feel surrounded by products built to outlast common sense. A loaf of bread becomes more than a loaf of bread. It becomes a symbol of the entire system: soft, cheap, convenient, familiar, and somehow unsettling. This is why the bread clips spread. They are visual. Nobody needs a chart. Nobody needs a lecture. The viewer sees the date, sees the bread, and feels the question immediately. If this can sit here this long, what exactly am I feeding my family? That question is bigger than mold. It is about whether convenience has crossed into something people no longer trust. The next shock is quieter, but in some ways more insulting. Products do not have to disappear to change. They can keep the same logo, the same color scheme, the same mascot, the same shelf space, and the same emotional connection while the formula underneath slowly shifts. More sugar here, less fiber there, a little more sodium, a cheaper oil, fewer minerals, a different texture, a smaller serving, a new package that says improved, while the nutrition panel tells another story. This is the food version of shrinkflation, but it cuts deeper than package size. Shrinkflation makes people angry because they notice there is less in the bag. Skimpflation is more dangerous because the downgrade hides inside the ingredient list. The box still looks like the childhood memory. The taste is almost close enough. The price may be higher. The nutrition may be weaker. The consumer is expected not to notice, but people are noticing. A product can keep the same calories while becoming less useful to the body. Calories are not the whole story. Two foods can both say 250 calories and still deliver different amounts of fiber, protein, minerals, added sugar, sodium, and satiety. When a brand changes the recipe but leaves the identity intact, customers feel tricked because they were not buying only a barcode. They were buying trust. That is why reformulation hits differently now. Americans are exhausted by hidden downgrades. Their rent is higher, their insurance is higher, their car payment is higher, their groceries cost more. So when the food itself also feels cheaper, thinner, sweeter, saltier, or less nourishing, it confirms the suspicion that the consumer is being squeezed from every direction. The supermarket starts to feel like a negotiation where only one side has the full contract. The real crisis cannot be explained by one scary label. It is much larger. Ultra-processed food became the foundation of the American diet. CDC data from August 2021 through August 2023 found that ultra-processed foods made up about 55% of total calories consumed by Americans age 1 and older, and nearly 62% of calories for youth. NIH describes ultra-processed foods as ready-to-eat or ready-to-heat, manufactured products that often use ingredients not typically found in home cooking. That number is staggering because it means this is not a fringe issue. It is not a few people eating snacks at midnight. It is the center of the food system. The modern grocery store is filled with products designed for durability, flavor impact, texture control, repeat buying, and low-cost production. Emulsifiers keep things smooth. Stabilizers protect texture. Preservatives extend shelf life. Sweeteners sharpen the reward. Colors make food look more exciting than it is. Flavor systems create consistency at a massive scale. The goal is not simply to feed people. The goal is to make products that can survive shipping, sit on shelves, taste the same in every state, and keep customers coming back. That does not happen by accident. It is engineering. The cruel part is that millions of families rely on these foods because they are affordable, available, and fast. When money is tight, time is short, and healthier options cost more, ultra-processed food becomes the default. Not because everyone is careless, because the system makes the cheap option the easiest option. So the food crisis is also an affordability crisis. Fresh food can be expensive. Clean ingredients can cost more. Cooking from scratch takes time many workers do not have. A parent can know the label looks bad and still buy the product because dinner has to happen tonight. That is what makes this so dark. America built a food system where people are told to make better choices inside a store, designed to make the worst choices cheaper, louder, brighter, and easier. For years, artificial colors were treated like decoration. A brighter cereal, a more electric drink, a candy that looked more exciting, a snack that looked fun for children. The colors were presented as harmless background noise in the American diet. Now they are part of the public backlash. In 2025, HHS and the FDA announced efforts to phase out petroleum-based synthetic dyes from the national food supply, including 6 widely used FD and C colors, while encouraging industry to move toward alternatives. FDA pages in 2026 also track industry pledges related to removing certified color additives from products. That alone tells people something important. If the system is now trying to remove ingredients that were common for decades, shoppers naturally ask why they were so common in the first place. This is not about pretending every colorful product is dangerous. The sharper point is that American consumers are tired of being told not to worry until the same institutions quietly change direction years later. First, it is normal. Then it is questioned. Then it is reformulated. Then companies act like the change proves they cared all along. The public sees the pattern. Artificial colors also expose how much of modern food is visual manipulation. Food is not only made to taste a certain way, it is made to look more exciting, more fruity, more intense, more fun, more child-friendly, more addictive to the eye. Color turns sugar water into an identity. It turns cereal into entertainment. It turns candy into a cartoon. People are beginning to understand that some products were designed to attract attention before they were designed to nourish anyone. That realization makes the entire aisle look different. Just as Americans started questioning processed food, cultivated meat entered the conversation. The idea sounds like science fiction, but it is already real. In June 2023, Upside Foods and Good Meat received final USDA approvals for the sale of cell-cultivated chicken in the United States, after regulatory review involving FDA and USDA. Supporters describe it as a breakthrough. Meat produced from animal cells without raising and slaughtering the full animal, with potential benefits for innovation, animal welfare, and environmental pressure. But to many ordinary consumers, the emotional reaction is completely different. They hear cells, they hear tanks, they hear growth medium, they hear meat without the animal. Suddenly, dinner sounds less like a farm and more like a factory experiment. That does not mean the technology should be reduced to fear. Cultivated meat is not the same thing as bioengineered crop labeling. It is a separate category, with separate regulation, separate processes, and separate debates. But culturally, it lands in the same anxious moment. People are already suspicious of the food system, already reading labels, already questioning shelf life, already wondering why familiar products taste different. Then they see meat being grown from cells, and the future feels like it arrived without asking permission. The food industry sees possibility. Consumers see distance. Distance from soil, distance from animals, distance from cooking, distance from anything their grandparents would recognize as food. That is the emotional problem companies underestimate. They talk about efficiency. The public thinks about trust. They talk about innovation. The public wonders what else will be changed quietly. They talk about feeding the future. The public asks whether the future will still taste like food. Cultivated meat may remain limited, expensive, and niche for now. But as a symbol, it is enormous. It tells Americans that the next phase of food will not just be processed. It may be produced in ways that completely rewrite what food means. This is why the issue keeps growing. People are not reacting to one product. They are reacting to an entire pattern. Juice that barely contains juice. Bread that lasts too long. Snacks that change quietly. Labels that sound scientific but confusing. Artificial colors now being reconsidered. Ultra-processed products making up more than half of the diet. Meat technology moving from headlines into regulatory approval. Every piece connects to the same suspicion. The food system became more complicated than the public was allowed to understand. The emotional center is betrayal. Consumers do not expect every food to be perfect. They understand snacks are snacks. They understand candy is candy. They understand frozen meals are not garden vegetables. What they cannot tolerate is the feeling that companies used familiar images, comforting language, and childhood brands to hide a steady downgrade in quality and transparency. A person should not need to decode 25 ingredients to know whether a product is close to real food. Parents should not need to investigate every lunchbox item like a crime scene. Families should not need to choose between affordability and confidence. Yet that is where the system has arrived. The most disturbing part is that the front of the package still sounds innocent. It says classic. It says family favorite. It says fruit punch. It says honey wheat. It says farm style. It says made with real cheese. It says no sugar added. It says natural flavor. The language creates comfort while the ingredient panel creates uncertainty. That gap is where trust dies. Once consumers feel misled, every new label becomes suspicious. Every new technology feels threatening. Every reformulation feels like another hidden cut. Every color looks artificial. Every long shelf life feels unnatural. Even when there is a reasonable explanation, people no longer accept it easily because the relationship has already been damaged. The food industry spent decades training people not to look too closely. Now everyone is looking. The most important change is not happening inside factories. It is happening inside the minds of consumers. People are rebuilding their relationship with food around suspicion. They are comparing labels. They are avoiding certain ingredients. They are choosing shorter ingredient lists when they can. They are questioning brands they grew up with. They are paying more attention to preservatives, colors, added sugar, oils, and nutrition panels. Some are switching stores, some are cooking more, some are throwing products away, others cannot afford to change much, but even they are watching. That matters because distrust changes markets slowly, then suddenly. For a long time, big food companies could rely on habit. A family bought the same bread, the same cereal, the same crackers, the same drinks, the same frozen meals, because familiarity made the decision easy. But once familiarity becomes suspicion, brand loyalty weakens. The logo no longer protects the company. The ingredient list becomes more powerful than the mascot. A quiet revolt begins when people stop believing the shelf. This does not mean everyone will become perfectly healthy. It does not mean ultra-processed food disappears. It does not mean lab-grown meat takes over or fails. It does not mean every bioengineered label creates danger. The real shift is more basic and more dangerous for the industry. Consumers are demanding to know what happened to their food. And once that question enters the culture, it does not leave. America's food system now faces a trust problem that cannot be solved with brighter packaging. A new label will not fix it. A softer commercial will not fix it. A celebrity campaign will not fix it. The only way back is transparency, simpler formulas, clearer language, and food that does not make people feel like they need a science degree to eat dinner. The grocery store used to be a place of routine. Now it feels like a place of investigation. The change people are noticing is not imaginary. It is the result of years of processing, reformulation, artificial color, shelf life engineering, confusing disclosures, and new food technology finally becoming visible at the same time. The most disturbing part is how normal it all looked while it was happening. The labels were small, the packages were familiar, the brands were trusted. Then people started reading. Once that happened, the illusion cracked. America did not just lose confidence in a few products. It started losing confidence in the food system itself. And when trust disappears from the dinner table, everything tastes different.